I'm Madeline Johansson. You're watching The View on Alternative TV. On the 27th of February, Vera Twomey set out on a long walk from Cork to Dublin. Vera is fighting for her daughter Ava's right to effective medicine. 7-year-old Ava is suffering from Dravet syndrome, a rare and drug-resistant form of epilepsy which can cause up to 20 seizures a day. But there is hope for Ava. Medicinal cannabis has been proven to reduce seizures in patients with Dravet syndrome and significantly increase their quality of life. I spoke to Vera Twomey in her home in Aherbulloch, County Cork.
Ava was born in November 2009, and it was a terribly bad winter at that time. She was not given her 2-month vaccination until she was 4 months old. We brought her home and she had her first 45-minute seizure that night. She was taken by ambulance into the CUH. There was talks of sending away some blood samples to the United Kingdom. Ava had a thing called Dravet syndrome, an intractable form of drug-resistant epilepsy, and we were stunned, of course, and we said, you know, what does that entail? And they said to us that, well, it's unlikely that your child will live beyond the age of 3. Now, this was our first child, so this was, I mean, even worse because of that. They said Ava would never talk, she would never walk, she would inevitably be in a wheelchair, and that we would have to accept that she would be in residential care for the rest of her life. So, although they described it as drug-resistant epilepsy, we were put on medication, and the next thing we were on 2 medications, and then we were on 3, and then we were on 5, and it progressed on, and Ava's seizures were uncontrollable. They've always been severe and unpredictable and constant. They said she wouldn't walk inside in the hospital that day. I just said, that's not going to happen. We did get Ava to walk, and Ava got up at the age of 2 years and she was walking at that stage, but unfortunately her seizures were still out of control. She was put on a medication called stiripentol, which was not licensed in Ireland at the time, so it was brought in from the UK. After she went on that medication, she had a severe reaction to it, and she was in a coma for a week. We nearly lost her at that stage, and she came out of the coma. We brought her home, and it took us another year to get her to walk again, because we had to build up her weight. We had to, you know, obviously care for her very carefully and closely. We were going through all of the medications, one by one, failure after failure after failure. Hope, of course, that the next one was going to do something to help. In some cases, there might have been a temporary breach in the seizures, but the nature of Dravet is that it can make its way through the medications and the seizures reoccur again. The medication doesn't work effectively in the long term. Constant seizures, seizure counts climbing from 10 to 12 to 14. We began the petition in October, and we were beginning to get, you know, certainly a lot of support for Ava's situation and highlighting her need at that stage. In November, she had 16 seizures in 7 hours, and she suffered a heart attack inside in the hospital. And you know, that was the next time that we nearly lost Ava. So we got her home anyway, and we got her back, thank God, and it motivated us more to continue to try and get something, you know, that we were seeing was working for other people, like the likes of Charlotte Figgy was, and her mother were inspirational to me, because Charlotte's seizures were much even more, they were even worse than what Ava was going through. We tried to contact Simon Harris, and there was no real feedback from the minister, from the HSE. So I attempted to contact some radio stations and some broadcasts to see could they help us, newspapers and so forth, and that's how it began to come out in the public more. I contacted News Talk in around May time, I think, of 2016. I said out on the air that, you know, I needed to talk to Simon Harris. I needed to speak to the HSE. He contacted me that very evening after 7 months of trying to contact him. We had a meeting, and like I said, we were hopeful but naive, I think, when we attended that meeting, because they said that they would help us. They said that we needed a paediatric neurologist to prescribe the medicinal cannabis for Eva. So I suppose I innocently enough spent the summer trying to get a paediatric neurologist that would oversee the oversee a prescriber, oversee the treatment for Eva. But of course, subsequent to that search, I realise now that the neurologists and the consultants in this country are not able to help their patients. They're setting up of the Compassionate Access Programme, and I have spoken directly to consultants about this. They're saying, how are we going to use this Compassionate Access Programme when the product that we are potentially wishing to prescribe is an illegal substance in this country? The whole Charlotte's Web thing was becoming more and more clear to me, more and more evidence out there coming from Canada, coming from across Europe. Paul, my husband and I, were hesitant about purchasing it over the internet because, well, you know, we hadn't met Joelle Stanley at this stage. It was just, we were worried about, you know, we were concerned obviously to do the very best for Eva. At the end of September, Eva had 25 tonic-clonic seizures in 36 hours. And we began Charlotte's Web in October of 2016. And in the month of October, once Eva began the medicinal cannabis, she had 11 consecutive seizure-free days. There was this lift, there was this brightness, there was more alertness, more awareness. She began to hold herself more correct, like she began to hold herself more tall, you know what I mean? What has happened with my daughter is the most extraordinary release. She is sleeping, she has a better appetite, she is talking, she is singing. She should not be restricted to having access to CBD alone, when in 11 countries in Europe they are administering CBD and THC to their patients. She is a person just as valuable as any other person over in Europe or anywhere else in the world. The only format for gaining access to medicinal cannabis at the moment in Ireland is to leave your own country with a seriously, dangerously ill child. And the 5 options which Simon Harris gave us on the Tuesday night that we met him above in the Dáil were 1, a public consultant, 2, a private consultant, 3, treatment abroad, 4, the Compassionate Access Programme, and 5, the legislation. The public consultant is not willing to oversee Eva's care due to a lack of clinical evidence and a lack of expertise. Secondly, the private consultant was extraordinary in their efforts to try and achieve a solution for our daughter. That opportunity was stalled for us as well, because the inquiries that the consultant made led them to the point where there would have to be a second consultant to oversee the care alongside that consultant. And the second consultant is the consultant who is in the public system who refuses to oversee the care. Again, the third option, being the treatment abroad scheme, is unworkable because of travel. The Compassionate Access Programme, I've already mentioned that's a non-runner for any of the consultants or neurologists or paediatricians out there. And therefore, the fifth and final option, and the only option, is legislation. I mean, the walk to Dublin for me was an absolute necessity. Whatever I endured going up the road those days was nothing in comparison to the suffering that my daughter endures. you know, via Facebook and so forth, because what I've done has been very much, excuse me, surrounded, or it has really been on the petition page at change.org, or it's been on Facebook. I knew that we had support for Eva. I knew that there was good, decent people out there that care about Eva, but I had no idea that there was so many people out there that cared about her, you know. When Gino Kenny said that he'd get the train down to Cork, and he got a one-way ticket from Dublin down to Cork, and when he came down and he walked all the way from Mallow up to Dublin with me and with Brian and with Lindsay. When we walked up the road, I was absolutely privileged to meet the people that I encountered going up along the road, because there was kindness and generosity and friendship, and there was people that I will stay friends with for the rest of my life, I hope. The only way forward, the only way possible to help the politicians who care above in Dublin about this situation is for the ordinary people to stand together.
We're here in the studio with Gino Kenny TD and Tom Curran, who's a campaigner for medicinal cannabis. So Gino, I'll come to you first.
Okay,
what would your legislation do for someone like Eva?
well, it will give Eva and the many others accessibility to medicinal cannabis. At the moment, they cannot get access to medicinal cannabis, and it would be under kind of medical supervision. So that's essentially what our bill is trying to do, is to kind of take people out of kind of, I suppose, the shadows of criminality in some ways, and bring them out of the shadows under medical supervision. So that's basically what the bill is trying to do.
Yeah, and I assume that this would also help doctors who would be willing to prescribe this medication, but at the moment cannot do that.
No, they can't do it because there's no legislative change, and obviously that's what the bill is trying to do. And to give clarity to the medical profession that medicinal cannabis now can be a treatment option for the many people that it could benefit. Now obviously to do that, there has to be legislative change in the DOB. That will trickle down to the medical kind of the profession. And then, you know, then the many conditions that it could benefit, hopefully then people can, through a doctor's recommendation, then can be prescribed medicinal cannabis for a variety of conditions. Now there's some people that have come to a doctor, they might be using medicinal cannabis at that time, or they've used every single drug that's possible. The side effects could be pretty awful. So they should be, like what we're saying is that it should be a treatment plan when you go to a doctor to say, look, I want to use medicinal cannabis for this condition that I think could really actually benefit.
Mm-hmm. And the legislation was passed through the first stage of the DOL in December, and is now through the second stage, which is committee stage. And what do you expect to happen to the bill through this stage?
On the 1st of December it got cross-party support on the 1st of December. Now on the 5th of April it has it's pre-legislative scrutiny. So basically I had to give a presentation to the Health Committee that lasted 2 hours and kind of talk about the bill. And then hopefully then it goes to, again, back to the Health Committee for amendments. And then that process goes back to the DOL. That process is a 3 kind of way process. And that could take anything up to 2 to 3 months. We hope that there is some sort of clarity, legislative clarity, before the summer recess in the DOL, which is mid-July. And hopefully there's legislative change before then.
Thanks, Gino. Now, Tom, people might know you from the fight that you had with your wife Mary, who both of you took a case to the Supreme Court for her right to die. And Tom, you're also now campaigning for legalisation of medicinal cannabis. So how do you think legislation like Gino's would have benefited Mary?
Well, the legislation, what it would have done was stopped Mary and I being criminals, because Mary used cannabis for the treatment of her MS for 10 years, up to 10 years before she died 3 years ago. We grew it at home, but that put us into the realms of criminality, that we were criminals for doing it, but it was by far the best medicine that she got. So the idea of cannabis as a medicine isn't something new to Ireland. It's been around for a long time. They've been campaigning on it for a long time. It has come to, I suppose, the fore because of brave people like Vera and like Bark in Galway and other people that have brought their stories forward. But as far as we're concerned, it was the best medicine that Marley had the least side effects. And during those 10 years, I introduced an awful lot of MS people in Ireland who are now using, there are literally hundreds of people in Ireland that are using cannabis to treat their MS and other problems where chronic pain is one of their conditions.
Mm. And you have obviously looked at Gino's bill, and you're obviously supporting Gino's bill, and do you have any concerns yourself about the next stages that it'll go through?
I do. I mean, well, I suppose a lot of it is to do with the way it was handled immediately. It passed through without any objection from anybody, which was great. But then Simon Harris, the health minister, asked for a report from the HPRA, and that came back with a very limited number of conditions. And also, I don't think it's any coincidence that the conditions that were suggested could be treated, that are products available from big pharma, the pharmaceutical companies, to treat those three. So what we want is cannabis, the plant, and the direct extracts from it, like cannabis oil and the tinctures that are made from cannabis directly, to be available to people. But what this is doing is it's making these pharmaceutical products, which are not necessarily direct extracts. Some of them, in fact, are synthetic cannabis rather than natural cannabis. And it's known that, particularly for the treatment of pain, that it's the whole plant that's needed. There are hundreds of ingredients in cannabis. And what the pharmaceutical companies are doing are extracting some of those, but not taking them all. And we know from research that's been done around the world that it's the whole plant that works, not just bits of it.
Mm. Yeah, so Gino, what do you think of this? What do you think about the big pharma companies coming in and basically trying to make profits out of this?
Well, I think when I hear big pharma, I have big worries, big worries. And I think Tom is correct. I think the compassionate access scheme which the government are proposing is extremely limited. It stipulates 3 conditions. That's intractable epilepsy, multiple sclerosis with spasticity, and the side effects of chemotherapy. Now there's a lot of conditions excluded. One major condition that's excluded, and this is what gives the game away, is chronic pain. If chronic pain is not part of the stipulation in the kind of the cannabis access program, then it's doomed to failure. And they've also stipulated that pharmaceutical grade cannabis will be probably the primary medication treatment option for them to treat conditions. Now, to me, that's not good enough at all. That's not good enough. As Tom said, it's the full plant extract that patients are looking for. So there's going to be a big battle ahead. There's always a battle ahead between kind of big pharma and people that don't want pharma in their lives. They want a natural ingredient and a natural kind of plant to kind of treat their conditions, and that's what we've been fighting from the very start.
So Tom, do you want to tell me something about the clinical trial in UCC?
Well, the organisation that I work with and I've worked alongside for a long number of years is Help Not Harm. And as I say, this is something that we've been doing for quite some time. And as soon as the HPRA report came out, excluding the use of cannabis for chronic pain, which is where it's used worldwide, all over the world, it's the main use of cannabis as a product, as a medicine. We've been approaching various universities about the concept of doing clinical trials, and we've agreed with Cork University that they will carry out a clinical trial using cannabis as pain medication. We're now in the process of getting funding for that. We need the funding for it. We have backers who are prepared to fund it, so that should be going ahead fairly soon. But the other part that is going to be an obstacle, even when it is legalised, is the knowledge among the medical profession about the use of cannabis for all of the various things that it can help.
Okay, thanks. And obviously we want to continue to fight to keep the legislation as is. Yeah. So there is a protest on Wednesday, I believe.
On the 29th at 7 o'clock outside the Dáil. So hopefully a lot of people can attend. And I think this issue it's so topical and it's so popular. And I think we can get thousands of people outside the Dáil and make the government to say, look, this is not going to go away. You have to legislate, because if you don't legislate, there's going to be so many kind of the grey areas in this subject. But I mean, this is a people's movement. This is a movement of just ordinary people across Ireland to say, look at, get something done, legislate, put this bill forward, and you know, make people, give the people benefits of medicinal cannabis, because there's huge benefits.
Okay, thank you so much, both Gino and Tom, for coming and speaking.
Thanks, man.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Okay, thank you.